liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Woo! It is Monday, February 13th, 2023. Time for another show. Barely made it, in place and prepared and ready to go. All right, well, a normal Monday morning. It's post-Super Bowl, if that's the sort of thing that disrupts your schedule. Not this time for me, because it didn't involve my teams, and frankly, these days I'm not even that much into my team anyway, so it doesn't make that much of a difference. But a good run for everybody, an exciting game, occasionally I watch a Super Bowl that I really don't care about, and I didn't care about the outcome of this one so much, except maybe some residual feeling about not wanting the Eagles to win, possibly because they're NFC East, and I'm nominally a Giants fan at this point. Just sort of residual holdover. I don't know. I haven't been watching as much. They had a good year. I watched a game or two. That's about the extent of my fandom at the moment. And I used to be much more rabid fan, but not so much these days. Anyway, so exciting game, lots of scoring. It was well played. And then lots of people, I don't know, the people that will care about it will spend their time discussing the penalty calls at the end of the game and whether it changed the outcome of the game. But okay, whatever. I have not really reviewed I didn't make a special effort to watch the commercials this time, which is too bad. But I saw a couple of them, including one that ran locally here in the Washington, D.C. area, and I think it was like a 5-second spot that just they stuck in between commercials, something like that. And it's difficult to interpret. I'm not entirely sure exactly what was going on, but it's a local plumbing and heating company called Michael and Son. I don't know. Maybe it's made a national report at this point, because it did play in the D.C. area, and so all the reporters are there, and they'll likely cover it. But it took a shot at the balloon thing, the Chinese balloon thing, but it wasn't clear whether it was supposed to be sort of an anti-Biden thing or just a, hey, here's a funny thing about something that's in the news thing. So I'm not entirely sure what to make of it, but they have a little jingle there, Michael and Son, like I said, plumbing and heating, and their little jingle is, if you can't, we can, like the handyman service. If you can't do fix the thing in your house, we can fix it. If you can't, we can, Michael and Son. It's been their jingle since forever. People in the Washington, D.C. area may know. And so they just sang the jingle over video of a balloon, but, very obvious, like a white regular kid's balloon, but tied with a little thingy, maybe a computer-generated piece of machinery, whatever, dangling from it. And I guess a hand holding, it looked like maybe some pliers. I didn't know whether it was holding a pin or something. The pliers, maybe it has a pin or a needle in it or something, and it comes in to off screen and pops the balloon, to the tune of, if you can't, we can, Michael and Son. And it was just, it struck me that it was either just whimsical, commentary on the news, or if you can't, we can, like, if you can't, shoot it down because Biden, Yargo Bargo. You remember, of course, all week last week, conservatives spent the week saying Biden couldn't shoot this thing down early enough and yada yada, even though there were pretty good explanations for why it wasn't shot down earlier. And then, as it turns out, for the rest of the week, there was something else being shot out of the sky every day, literally. Another balloon, some other objects that they've declined to identify, some of them shot down over Alaska, some of them shot down over Canada. There is a difference between the two of them. And some of them now shot down over Lake Huron, also not Alaska, but partially Canada, etc. So they're shooting these things down all over the place. So I don't know what the if you can't thing is about. But then I was just curious about whether it was supposed to be a jab at Biden, because, and if it's not, they need to clear that up really quickly, because this is the sort of area where, there'll be people who are like, I'm not going to call those guys to do my plumbing now because they made this strangely political commercial. And if they didn't see that it could be interpreted that way, well, that's just kind of dumb. But I don't know. I don't use them, so it won't make a difference for me. But that'll always be in the back of my mind. So you got to be careful with your Super Bowl commercial messaging. That's just the way it is, and it's always been the case, and nothing new there, except for the fact that, I don't know, we're talking about it. Okay, so that happened. The Super Bowl happened. Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs, because they won, and now I guess they get to go to the White House, and maybe there'll be some political play around that, and we'll see who goes and who doesn't, and who shouts things about Brandon and who doesn't, and I don't know. We'll see whether that's still an issue in professional sports. Lots to round up, of course. Greg already getting the Raft O stories prepared. But yeah, other than that, there's no real, I don't know. I didn't take much away from the Super Bowl other than nice game. Well done. Nobody got, injured, badly enough to send them to the hospital. I don't think so. That's good news. And, that's the sort of thing. That's all you can hope for in these football games. There was a big hit in somebody's chest, during the game, and got people worried briefly. It took them a minute to get up, but we had just seen that happen in a football game. So, I don't know. So good. And now it's a good game if nobody gets so grievously injured that they're hospitalized or their life is threatened, which maybe gives you a hint as to why I'm watching a little less football these days than I used to. It's just one of those things, and it's hard to enjoy it the way I used to, now that it's much more obvious how much people are going through and how much pain and difficulty it causes later in life, and maybe I shouldn't, participate in the same way. It's difficult to get past that, and it's a weird thing because it's so ingrained in our culture, but so is shooting one another, so that's pretty lousy too. Okay, let's see. Other things to catch up on that we'll load up for the rest of the day. Oh, yes, right. There's lots of talk and plenty of writing very quickly produced both on social media and in publications around the blogosphere or the onlineosphere, since we can't just limit it to the blogs. Also about Super Bowl advertising, including the slate, the campaign of commercials for, I don't know who did they have a sponsor name, but it was the religious ads talking about Jesus and he's one of us, and they were very, lovely montages and inclusive type of visual messaging. But as people were hastening to point out, they were in fact sponsored by an organization that has let's say less than spotless. It's more than less than spotless. It's an actual bad record on things that they were, seemed to be preaching against, the division and hatred that was plaguing America that they featured in their second commercial, and hoping that people would move away from. A lot of people would, probably point the finger right back at the people behind this organization. Now, maybe it's a new effort to turn over a new leaf. Who knows? But, once you find out who we're dealing with, you might think that that's not the case. We'll get to that later, though. Greg Dworkin is here. He's ready to talk about his raft of stories. He might have watched the Super Bowl. He might have had snacks during the Super Bowl. We'll find out how it was going. How are you today, Greg?
I'm just fine, thank you.
Okay. Did you watch?
I did. I watched parts of it off and on. I watched the good parts.
Right. Oh, yeah. By definition,
I watched people slipping on the turf. I watched quarterback sneaks into the end zone.
Yeah,
I watched the last quarter, which is, where the game was decided in the last 8 seconds by a field goal. It was all good.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I sort of casually watched, and, we had some food and things happened. So that's it. Okay. That's the Super Bowl report, everybody. If you need it,
and of course,
detail,
I
go to the sports pages.
Got the impression, and I've certainly seen this, as you say, on the onlineosphere, that the commercials simply weren't as good this year as they have been in other years. There'll never be another half bowl entertainment like Prince.
Yeah,
and it is what it is. The grifter ads, simply get replaced one year by another.
Yes,
Last
that's
year
true.
it was crypto.
Right, they were gone
This year it was come to Jesus. Mm-hmm. And they're always trying to get your money or get you to do stuff.
Well, that's kind of the point.
That's just the way it is. That's what
really.
ads are for.
Yeah. So I don't hold a grudge about that, but it was nice to note that there was no
nothing
crypto.
personal.
No, the crypto thing, the absence of crypto was funny, interesting to be erased from the landscape so quickly, but it was a bad year for crypto.
Right. So the Jesus ads were sponsored by a group called He Gets Us, which is a Kansas-based nonprofit, and it's.
I understand them to be backed by the Hobby Lobby.
Donate
guys.
tons of money to something called the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a nonprofit known for fighting abortion rights.
Right. That's where we run into
they fight
them a lot.
non-discrimination laws, they fight abortion rights, and want everybody to get together and give them money.
Yeah, and stop fighting against us, basically. But yeah, Alliance Defending Freedom, we see a lot in court filing terrible lawsuits that make us sensible people who listen to this show upset. They trigger the libs with their stuff. But I understand that the CEO of Hobby Lobby is big into this.
Yeah, sponsored by the guy who owns Hobby Lobby. Yeah. It's exactly right. So if you just want to put it in short context, that's what's going on here.
Yeah, I think that's probably all you really need to know about it. And the rest, otherwise, I mean, if you feel like taking the commercials at face value and say, yeah, treat people nicely, cool, do it. I mean, you guys should.
Meanwhile, the New York Times has
will.
an expose on the top airship scientist Chinese program to watch the world from above. And so, you shoot stuff down,
Yeah.
And that's what our Air Force does, and they're having a good time,
I guess this is the first time in a long time they've got to shoot a lot of
Beggars Canyon. Every day they go up and they get to play.
Yeah, this is like four objects, but they're getting weirder.
They've been shooting
them
down all this time. I don't know why it's all in the news, but or maybe they just noticed them, or something. I don't know. Something happened about 2 weeks ago that all of a sudden they decided they were going to be real public with this stuff.
Yeah,
they didn't send the Men in Black out to erase your memory and all that. They just decided, okay, we'll go with it.
Yeah. I don't know what prompted the change. Whether you get the sense that this has been going on for a while, but until there was a furor in the news about it, he hasn't shot it down yet. And then when he started shooting them down immediately, people were saying, well, now the newspapers are just saying, well, he's so political, he's shooting them down immediately now. He's not even letting us do some drama
here. And there's the CNN ticker: Biden hasn't shot something down in 15 minutes and 45 seconds.
Right.
As if somehow this is all relevant. It's all kind of stupid and none of it matters.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about some stuff that matters.
Okay.
And that is that culture wars, which are fought to gain or retain power, and definitely not to right wrongs. So that's part of why there's Jesus ads on the Super Bowl, because everybody watches, and so they hope to get something out of it. Not clear what.
If you haven't heard of Jesus, now you have.
The piece by Axios that they were running is a share of Americans who say they're dissatisfied with the U.S. abortion policy
dissatisfied. That could mean anything.
Skyrocketed, which means the Biden administration is probably going to shoot it down. Here's the graph. We went from want less strict laws in 2021, somewhere in like the 15-16% range, and now it's up to 46. Huge jump. Whereas want stricter laws really hasn't changed all that much. It's gone down. In 2001, it was like 28, and now it's 15. So, a bit of a drop.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
But in 2001, want less strict laws went from 13% to 46% now. Just a huge jump in the last year. And that has a lot to do with Dobbs, which is an important concept here, right? We're going to talk a little bit about economics because there's a lot of economics articles that are of interest. Like, for example, over the weekend, I don't have this in the queue, but it was sort of interesting. The New York Times acknowledged with an article that, you know what, you might not actually have a recession.
Oh.
It was like news.
And then they weren't just going to go straight to depression.
There might be a soft landing.
All right.
You don't know. It might be. You simply don't know. So, sort of interesting and other economic news to follow.
Okay.
But
we'll come up with something
start
else.
with the culture wars because it's all part of that. Jill Lawrence writing in USA Today, in Trump versus DeSantis 2024 culture war, where Trump is calling DeSantis a groomer, and the New York Times is reporting DeSantis doesn't really quite know how to respond to it yet. In Trump versus DeSantis 2024 culture war, black and LGBTQ people will pay the highest price. The shape of the contest between the Republican Party's top 2024 White House aspirants is clear. When one goes low, the other goes lower. The GOP race is so far not only turning Michelle Obama's high-minded advice on its head, it gives new life and meaning to the phrase punching down. Why attack the rich and powerful, the white, the heterosexual Christian Ivy Leaguers, and those who don't have to worry about not fitting in or not being safe, when you can go after people who are simply trying to be themselves in a society that makes that uncomfortable and even dangerous, she writes, which is, of course, quite true. But it isn't just culture wars over people who don't quite fit in. Will Budge points out they're coming for climate change. A new front in the culture wars as right-wingers in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, kill a plan for a middle school reading of a young adult bestseller around climate. The book is called 2 Degrees, A Planet in Crisis, and Time is Running Out. The book banning bullies are winning until we start fighting back. And this goes to a whole strain of thought here. The Biden folks and the normies in the Democratic Party, the Chuck Schumers of the world, the Dick Durbins, really, would like to stick to the idea that if you go with kitchen table issues, that wins you elections. And here's the
kitchen
problem
tables don't
that.
vote, man.
Well, that's, near the yard signs, but we all know that they're important. So are kitchen tables.
All right.
But the thing is that kitchen table issues is really shorthand for how can I win a little bit more, a percentage or two back from white working class voters who right now are obsessed with culture wars and are voting for Republicans because of it. And the point there is you can't. No. I mean, it's a good thing. It's a good play. You have to do that. But you win college voters, and you win people of color, and you win LGBTQ with defending their position in life with culture wars. So you can't ignore the culture wars.
Okay.
You have to be aggressive about taking a stance on that, simultaneously going with kitchen issues to say we haven't forgotten you, but you can't center that to the detriment, to the exclusion of your base and what got you here. And right now the Democratic base is college voters, people of color, LGBTQ, liberals, you have that coalition, and it's just large enough to win. If you could sneak a couple of degrees of points of percentage from white working class voters and get them not to vote Republican, then you win big, like Michigan.
All right.
And it's not a swing state anymore, so it's not a bad strategy. But it can't be at the exclusion of. But
yes, right.
At the same time, Biden's done an extraordinary amount of work, effort, resources, bills, and things of that sort into reshaping the economic structure of America. And it's sort of semi-invisible and therefore not necessarily going to be the thing that moves voters one way or the other, whereas the culture wars are quite visible. So there's two reasons to lean into the culture war, if you will. One is you have to keep your base energized, and the other is it's the far more visible fight. So, that's why the economic stuff is so important.
Okay.
Right. Meanwhile, Republicans, and we talked about this, realize that their base is split on economic issues, but united on culture war. So it's easy for them to do culture war.
Right. That's their obvious choice.
Whereas Democrats are interested in everything.
Well, we have broad interests. That's true.
So economics, certainly, but culture wars, too. So, just the difference in the parties there. Kurt Bardella in the LA Times points out House Republicans launched their big investigations this week, and guess how that went? It began with a massive credibility deficit, A recent Navigator research poll found that only 16% of Americans think the GOP's obsessive investigations are important. Remember, GOP is doing culture war stuff.
Yeah.
And the Pew Research Center found that 65% of U.S. adults believe Republicans will be overly focused on investigating the Biden administration.
Oh, yes.
Independent voters convened for a Washington Post focus group, and they viewed the Republican majority's agenda as mostly about revenge against Democrats and showed little interest in its preoccupation with Hunter Biden. When asked about the absurd new House Select Committee on the weaponization of the federal government, which, by the way, didn't go well, most Americans surveyed by ABC News and the Washington Post didn't find it legitimate. So that's a pretty good piece. It's in the Pundit Roundup, pointing out that the logistics of how the Republicans are trying to approach this isn't necessarily working for them, even if the concept is a real one, go for culture war because it unites our base.
Yeah.
And Abby Phillip, as Molly Jong Fast notes, Abby Phillip put up a weaponization committee poll, and this was from CNN, and here is that poll. Legitimate investigation, 36%. Attempt to score political points, 56%. No opinion, 8%.
Yeah, that's not good for them.
Not necessarily good numbers for them.
Huh.
So, yes,
right.
They're leaning into culture war. And no, Ron DeSantis doesn't really have an answer for Donald Trump calling him a groomer. And it'll be interesting to see how he approaches that. And there are apologists for DeSantis saying, well, he's biding his time. He's doing this. He's doing that. Yeah, Jeb Bush thought the same thing. So, you really have to have an answer for it. And so far, DeSantis doesn't. And it's not clear who's going to be able to. So,
yeah, I don't know what you do with that.
That doesn't make Trump a stronger candidate, especially in the general. So I'm perfectly happy to watch the Republican Party fight amongst themselves.
Yeah,
still,
it's entertaining in a way.
It's nice to handicap it and get a sense of what's going on.
Yeah, I'm not certain how they respond to it, and I don't know whether they have any plans for how to respond to it. Nobody thought, it's a sort of a weird variant on the leopards eating people's faces thing, right? I don't have a plan for fighting back against being called a groomer because I'm the one that's supposed to be calling others groomers. What am I supposed to do?
Right. So, it's again, that's also a culture war thing. You can't avoid it. It's just going to be the dominant theme. So you might as well get used to it, whether it's stupid or not, and have a plan of your own as to how you're going to deal with it. And, unfortunately for Democrats,
I mean, maybe it's just
the best way to deal with it is to highlight the harm that Ron DeSantis is doing, attacking educators, for example, and what it means to educators, attacking like their own citizens and what it means for their own citizens. But take it from Newtown, Connecticut. The best way to fight that is to put a face on the invisible people he's hurting. But that takes a toll on the individual people whose face you are offering to have as the agenda that will help to block this stuff. In other words, it's not easy.
No.
You have to have people willing to come forward, and coming forward, as we saw in the January 6th committee hearings, takes a toll, takes a price.
It does. They not only have to agree to do it, but they have to be aware of what it means to do it and how they'll become targets all over again.
And that's the most effective way to do it, and we're not there yet for those reasons. It just takes time to put that kind of program together.
I would say so. Yeah. All right. Well, that's one interesting explanation for why we just don't know what to do with this stuff. But neither do the people who are launching the attacks know what to do if they're just turned around. So I guess credit in that sense to the Trump campaign to be the first one to figure out that you could, just do the schoolyard bully thing with everybody,
right?
Whether
and
they're
as
on
we
your
see
side
with
or
the
not.
weaponization committee, attacks don't work simply because they're attacks. So
that's true. They do have to make a certain amount of sense. Okay. I just saw an article, good one from one of your usual sources from the Bulwark, talking about that very subject, and just interesting that there were people who were expressing outrage and who aren't necessarily never Trumpers, but who were saying they were expressing their disapproval of Trump's use of this tactic and how tisk tisk and going so low, etc. But then pointing out in Bulwark style, where none of these people were ever around saying it was too low a tactic to be contemplated when the attacks were against Democrats. That's fine to do that to them, but you've just done it to a Republican, so now it's fairly serious. It's an interesting take.
And racial and ethnic group stereotypes play a role in all of this.
Yes. How many of
You
them
know,
does it take to change a light bulb? We don't know, but they do play a role.
well, for example, Obama needed to go high. He couldn't go low because you can't be seen as an angry black man in that office. Remember, he
That's
had his
right.
anger management spokesperson for him and all of that on Saturday Night Live, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. I do recall
Biden's
that
Irish.
problem.
Therefore, by
Yes.
definition, spoiling for a fight.
I guess so. So how do you handle that? I guess you just have to go right
Well,
with
you
it.
handle it the way you handle the State of the Union.
Yeah, I guess so. Spoil.
And
Go
so,
ahead.
okay, fine. All right. You want to have a fight? Let's have a fight. It's going to be on my terms.
Yeah, it's interesting though. There are some
And
stereotypes
nobody,
you can get away with.
said, oh,
and
well,
some you
Biden can't be afford to be seen as an angry black man. I mean,
Well, that's true. We can't because that's enormously
it's just,
costly
it's
to
just
tell
a
people he's a
different
black
ethnic
man.
stereotype. It's just, weird
Yeah.
stuff.
Right.
But whether you talk about it or not, it's out there. That filter
Yeah.
is, how people see politics.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's got a whole other issue wrapped up in it, right? Well, we don't want to play into the stereotype of what angry black man because black man can't do the thing that he wants to do. Can you play into the stereotype of an angry white guy? Sure, yeah, white guys they can be as angry as they like. Go ahead, go for
Yeah,
it.
just make them ethnic.
Yeah,
Ethnic guys get into fights.
I guess so. I don't know, and somehow that works out.
Everybody knows that. Just think of high school.
Yeah, I guess so. Well,
Is it a stereotype?
Wild,
No,
overwhelming.
but I'm just saying these things all play, a role in how people view all this stuff.
That is true. There's a lot to dissect in that. So it's a 2-hour show, so we could do it if we want to. But I have a feeling there might be other news.
Well, I started, and then people yell at you. But
Yeah,
we'll do more.
right. No, that's fine.
Something different after the break.
There's a lightning rod.
I want to
Don't
get back
mind.
to economics here.
Okay, no one ever yells anyway. Okay, we'll be back in 2 minutes. Practice your yelling. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue on with, probably something different, but Greg's still here to deliver the different. So what's next on the agenda?
Well, again, we're going to
More
talk a
Super
little bit
Bowl.
more economics, a couple of pieces from the American Prospect. One of them that caught my eye is by Nick Hanauer. It's called The Transformation at the Heart of Biden's Middle Out Economic Agenda. And Middle Out Economic Agenda isn't really a slogan. It's not like the Bidens are trying to put that on a bumper sticker for the election.
Okay,
But
good.
it is
Didn't
what
sound
they're
good.
doing.
Yes.
And, for example, Hanauer says, in the opening paragraphs of Tuesday night's State of the Union, Biden declared, I ran for president to fundamentally change things, to make sure the economy works for everybody so we all feel pride in what we do, to build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out, not from the top down. Because when the middle class does well, the poor have a ladder up and the wealthy still do very well. We all do well. So he's attempting, Hanauer says, to do something no president has done since Ronald Reagan, transform how Americans understand the economy and the role of government in creating economic growth and broad-based prosperity. The agenda Biden's advancing is much more than a collection of policies. His accomplishments represent a reimagining of how America conceives of and executes economic policy. So he's delivered on that vision, as he's made clear in the first 45 minutes in the State of the Union. He signed historic legislation to invest in infrastructure, high-tech manufacturing, fight climate change, increase Americans' incomes, and lower their costs through executive orders and appointments in administrations reigning in the power of corporate monopolies in order to drive innovation, raise wages, make people's lives more affordable, and get better Super Bowl ads.
I guess so. All right. That's a good ad, or a good addition, rather.
Right. Biden, well, I added that. Biden has accomplished more to support working and middle-class Americans in his first 2 years in office than the last 6 presidents combined. And he also made clear there's much more on his list. They're not just important because of their specific worth. They add up to a new way of looking at it. The phrase building the economy from the bottom up and middle out has been a mantra of Biden's presidency. The middle out language is more than a slogan. The president understands that narrative precedes policy. Lincoln spelled this out by saying public sentiment is everything. He who molds public sentiment goes deeper than he who enacts statutes. Said in a more modern way, narrative explains why to do something. Policy describes what to do. Narrative is strategy. Policy is tactics. So in other words, you got to do politics before you do policy. We say that all the time on this show.
Yes. Well, in order to give you the right to do the policy.
So Democrats often shake their heads in amazement that even though the American economy has performed much better under Democratic presidents and Republicans since World War II, which, by the way, was a long time ago.
Yes.
Including on job creation, GDP growth, stock market returns, personal income growth, and corporate profits, polling always shows that more people see Republicans as better for the economy. The reason isn't a mystery. Narrative shapes how people see the world. Republicans have excelled at consistently advancing an overall narrative about how the economy grows and how jobs are created, and they've been rewarded by the public who score the party as better stewards. The public believes Republicans are better at running the economy, even though their trickle-down claims tax cuts for the rich create growth, that raising wages kills jobs, and that any form of regulation destroys productivity, even though they've been repeatedly disproven. In fact, the historical record shows the Republican policy agenda did nothing but enrich their big donors and increase budget deficits.
Yeah.
Whereas Democrats actually do stuff.
Right.
Right?
But that's boring.
So it is boring. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So what do? 3 core imperatives: raising incomes and lowering costs to enable all Americans to participate robustly in the economy, increasing both human and material capabilities to ensure people have both the individual capability and the material infrastructure to robustly participate in the economy. That's why it's important to bring broadband to rural areas, for example, thereby getting a couple of points of I like what you did, hopefully, for the next election. And managing markets to maximize competition and innovation. And these 3 imperatives are necessary to build a thriving middle class. Now, Biden's done it with new laws to raise wages by including language in the infrastructure law and other statutes that publicly finance projects pay higher wages, and Made in America, Buy in America provisions requiring infrastructure projects purchase materials from U.S. companies. And both of these policies will give more Americans good-paying jobs. The FTC is ending the use by companies of non-compete clauses, and that change alone is forecasted to deliver a stunning $300 billion in incremental wages to workers. That's the kind of quiet stuff he does that you don't know about because they're not touting it. Right?
Or I'm not caring when they do. I don't know.
Well,
maybe it's my
$300 billion in wages to people is like good.
Yeah.
The second imperative is building human and material capacities, which is the CHIPS Acts, and invest in important technologies like semiconductors, put billions of dollars in R&D.
Yes.
And the third imperative, managing markets for innovation and competition. In July 2021, he issued an executive order outlining 72 actions by 17 agencies to foster competition in the U.S. economy that's become dominated by corporate monopolies. And aggressively attacking monopoly power is fundamental to middle-out economics. So he's doing all of those things while the Republicans are threatening to renege on the debt.
Yes, plus making sure that you'll see dirty pictures of Hunter Biden somehow.
Right. So, the model perhaps is a little bit too esoteric, maybe a little 50,000 feet. So let's bring it down to something, as they like to say, as the kids say, let's make it real.
Okay. The kids
Okay.
said that probably about 20 years ago. Yeah.
The old restaurant model, says the Boston Globe, is
Restaurant
toast.
model.
And this
Avocado
is
toast.
a chef who poured his entire soul into his beloved Cafe Miranda in Rockland, Maine, and then came the apocalypse, which is to say the pandemic, and a reckoning with the demands he put on his employees.
All right. What were they?
So the first time we heard the murmur of the crowds and the clink of the glass during the pandemic, because we ate outside, it was great. But even before the pandemic, I could talk to 5 of my colleagues, which is to say other chefs, who said, yeah, this is beating the love out of us because we don't have the staff. We can't attract long-term staff because we're not giving them an equal shot economically. The model we had in order to make as much handmade food as we could is to work long hours and to sacrifice. But there are prices to be paid there. There were a lot of great people with massive heart doing this, but the model, small profit margins, no days off, 14-hour days, a self-indulgent rages by the chefs, that model is gone. Now, I know there's a labor problem everywhere. People are disappearing out of the workforce, and I can't make new people. What I can do is look at how we become competitive for the ones who are out there who do want to work. We haven't offered retirement or reasonable schedules or a career with the parameters one would expect in return for the effort, education, and passion. Years put in should get you something. And there are other easier jobs. Why would you come to work in a restaurant?
That is true.
Why would you go to a culinary education program and come out and offer $16 to $18 an hour with no plans for investment? So this is a passion for people. We have to give the people opportunity to have a life. We've always been like, put your head down. I know you had a bleeding chest wound, you're dragging one leg, but you got to show up for work.
Pretty much.
No more. I used to have on my job application, and this was written on the application. We work sick, hurt, and dead, and if you're dead, I want a note from the devil. That was the hiring document.
Wow.
I am so sorry to ever have printed that, but that's the model I'm saying is gone.
Well, that's not a bad thing then.
It's not a bad thing either, you know, and it all is tied into this. Now, here's another approach to this. This is David Day and D-Day in the old Daily Kos days on American Prospect. The twilight of the deficit hawks, Democrats have stopped being the willing partner in a great conspiracy to slash social insurance. Remember Erskine Bowles?
Yes. That was a real person's name.
Yeah. And what was his name? Alan Simpson. And so Simpson Bowles was going to be the grand bargain that John Boehner and Barack Obama couldn't achieve in order to stabilize things.
Right.
And Dave Dion writes, it wasn't so long that deficit hawkery was a dominant political identity in both parties. A significant chunk of austerian demigod Pete Peterson's fortune was spent, and thousands of op-eds and thinly veiled news stories deployed. Didn't that guy die? That's why
I don't know
it's
if
not
I would
around
know.
as much. To convince the public that fiscal deficits are a moral crime against future generations, that government budgets must operate like family budgets, and caring about the long-term budget picture in 2096 was more responsible than worrying about whether existing seniors have retirement and ability to afford medications.
What a weird philosophy.
Right. And the key to the success of this unpopular agenda was buy-in across the political spectrum. In other words, you had to have an Erskine Bowles coupled with Alan Simpson, the Republican, to get it done. Well, no more.
All right.
Right? The Democrats have said, we're done with that.
All right. Yeah, then, all right, yeah.
Right? If you know where to look, you can see the angst this is causing, Dave Dion writes. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, a remnant of the deficit hawkery architecture first assembled in the 90s, put out a statement this week accusing the White House of demagoguing the idea of a fast-track deficit commission that would propose budgetary changes, including cuts to Social Security and Medicare, and get an up or down vote without amendments or the potential for a filibuster. White House spokesperson Andrew Bates called the deficit commission idea a death panel for Medicare.
Hey.
And they got all upset about it.
Oh. Well,
they said, that demonstrates a lack of seriousness on this important issue, which means, you're not going along with our fig leaf and you're not playing along with our PR campaign here.
It is it's an interesting play all by itself. I just want to point out that that coalition of people who are pushing for this and saying, well, what we need is a package that can have bipartisan support and be protected from the filibuster. Those guys are nowhere on helping anything else get past the filibuster. They're the ones insisting that the filibuster is a great idea and creates bipartisanship.
And never change it.
Yeah, and now they need something different for their own purposes, and all of a sudden, we can put the filibuster aside for this one because it's bipartisan, you see. So now the removal of the part of the filibuster creates bipartisanship. Interesting. All right. Great.
Now,
good to have you.
This is all, of course, key to the battle over raising the debt limit.
Yes. Right.
Because Republicans say we have to destroy the country in order to save Medicare and Medicaid, but especially Social Security. And so if we have to sacrifice Medicaid along the way, oh, well, so be it.
Yeah. Also, I don't think they really care about it that much.
They don't care about any of this stuff.
No.
But Dave Dane points out the reality of the Social Security and Medicare trust funds rarely comes up in the conversation. Social Security's issues can permanently be solved with a relatively small amount of money, about 1.5% GDP. Due to inequality, nearly $1 in $5 of salary is exempt from Social Security payroll taxes, and they're capped at $160,000 of income per year. Get rid of the cap.
Yeah.
Done.
Well.
Social Security fixed. Okay, next. Shortfall in Medicare is even smaller, 0.41% of GDP by 2050, which, the tiny amount of money that puts these programs in jeopardy makes it absurd that Republicans would risk the good credit faith of the United States of America by defaulting on the debt when the amount of money we're talking about is so tiny.
Yes, so of course, tiny in governmental terms, but yes, it is, it's crazy, and I don't know, I suppose they probably know it, and don't care because they really do want to eliminate even that tiny amount of money. Well, I mean, one, it's not tiny in, personal terms, and two, it's not tiny if you think that the manipulation you're going to implement will put that amount of money in your pocket. That's not tiny when it's in a pocket. And if they get to keep it through slashing taxes or eliminating taxes or making everybody else pay the taxes but not them.
So flash forward to the State of the Union, or flashback a week, if you will.
Yeah,
and there's Joe Biden getting Republicans on the record, on camera, on C-SPAN, on your networks, to say, well, we don't want to touch Medicare and Social Security. That's off the table. We're not talking about that. Even though, as Dave Dine writes, you can still find plenty of Republicans who have expressed an interest in cutting Social Security. Just yesterday, Ron Johnson called Social Security a legal Ponzi scheme, and Trump's Vice President Pence proposed partial privatization last week.
Okay.
And the Republican Study Committee, as well as the House Budget Committee Chair Jody Arrington of Texas, has bolstered the notion of fast-track deficit commission. The problem for Republicans is they've always wanted Democrats as willing partners to this, in no small part because then they could try to pin the blame on Democrats in terms of actual principles. Of course, the GOP doesn't care about deficits. Under every Republican, it's happily supported giant deficit-busting tax cuts.
Yes.
I mean, Democrats always do better with the economy. It's not the narrative, but, that's the point.
Yeah.
So Democratic rejection of deficit politics leaves Republicans politically exposed, and so their leadership is compelled to take it off the table and publicly announce Social Security and Medicare won't be touched. That's what happened at the State of the Union.
Yeah.
Donald Trump wanting to use Social Security and Medicare as a wedge issue against Ron DeSantis, who was a Paul Ryan ditto-head in Congress, is another factor. But even if that didn't exist, Republicans don't have the cover they need to slash social insurance. And that puts the Pete Peterson people in a lonelier place. So they still churn out Time War policy ideas, but it's not working. And Republicans, as a result, have no real objective for debt limit hostage taking other than taking the hostage.
Yeah, interesting.
It makes the effort transparently political. There's no coherent story that we have to do this. And it's just an interesting, very interesting approach to stepping back and looking and saying, what are they trying to do? And
that's a
it
great
makes
way of
more sense if you
dismantling
realize that
their
what they're trying to do is
plan.
something that used to be easier, because it used to be that Democrats would play along with it.
Right.
Okay, we understand why you want to argue against raising the debt limit. You want to put this stuff on the table. It's politically difficult. Okay. We'll be on board with working something out. giving you some kind of fig leaf so that you can justify why you did this. That used to be the game, and now it's we're not doing that.
Well, that's good. Yeah, that is a sea change, really. And I guess they didn't realize that was, I don't know, maybe they didn't know that Democrats would play it that way, or they're just used to having
really very smart. He's been around. He knows what's going on here.
Yeah. Well,
and, without getting
an excellent response.
And he's spoiling for a fight on this.
Right. Yes. Well, it's true, though. I mean, as long as you were able to find...
Make fun of the old guy all you want to. This is where experience actually comes in handy. He's not going to get rolled on this.
It's remarkable because it was easy to imagine, well, he has been a part, at least, of the coalition among Democrats who did, in fact, used to volunteer to get rolled on this. So he comes from that wing, but... and so you might have thought he wouldn't have lost. He wouldn't have learned anything.
You can't fool me that the insurance companies are only out to help you. I know. I used to work for them.
Right. Well, so good news there. There's a lot more evolution of thought in the Biden wing than people gave him credit for.
That's exactly my point.
Okay. All right. Well, then I got it. All right. Hooray for me.
Good. And here's one last one.
Yes.
A huge uncharted experiment on the U.S. economy is about to begin. And, you can make all of this into a joke and say, oh, it's infrastructure week again.
Oh,
this stuff actually matters.
Yes. What matters? Point. What have we done? All
Passed laws that matter. Thanks to 3 laws, says Robinson Mayer, a climate change reporter in Washington, D.C., writing a guest piece for the New York Times. If you want to understand the immense windfall the Biden administration's about to bestow on green industries, take a look at hydrogen. Not just the movie The Glass Onion. But thanks to 3 laws Congress passed over the past 2 years, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Climate-Focused Inflation Reduction Act.
All right. Hydrogen, huh? Yeah.
The hydrogen industry will be very well taken care of. Over the next decade, the government's going to invest $8 billion on hydrogen hubs across the country. These are not for Zeppelins.
Okay.
Just,
good, you don't want to use hydrogen in those.
You don't want to use hydrogen for Zeppelins. We had, Hindenburg showed why you don't want to do that.
Right. Got a bad name for
the special zones
years.
where companies, universities, and local governments can build the machinery and expertise that the new industry needs. Other hydrogen projects will qualify for a $10 billion pot of money in the IRA or $1.5 billion in the infrastructure bill. And others could draw from a new $6.3 billion program that will help industrial firms develop financially risky demonstration projects. So that's up to $25 billion already before you get to the bazooka. An uncapped tax credit for hydrogen that could pay out perhaps $100 billion or more over the next decade.
Oh, okay.
Now, few Americans realize this yet, but the trifecta of Biden-era laws amounts to one of the biggest experiments in how the American government oversees the economy in a generation. Because if this experiment is successful, it'll change how politicians think about managing the market, and if it fails or misfires, it'll greatly limit the number of tools to fight climate change or a recession. Mm-hmm. So the story of 21st century American economy is being shaped right now by these bills, by the Biden administration.
I guess so.
Why
I was aware of other things. Yeah. I was aware of other provisions, environmental provisions of these bills, but more focused on what I guess is maybe a more traditional alternative energy type thing.
Right.
Electric cars and solar panels. Hydrogen I missed entirely.
Right. So I say experiment, this author writes, but really there are 2. The first concerns the economy. Mr. Biden's team believes it can move the U.S. toward a more robust, high-capacity, reindustrialized economy. Can it? Well, that's where you build infrastructure, roads, bridges, and high-speed internet.
Yeah, all hydrogen something.
Right. But the second experiment, can that same economy, which has virtually since the abolition of slavery derived a good deal of its industrial energy from extracting carbon from the ground and setting it on fire, find a new primary energy source?
Extracting
even today,
hydrogen from the water and setting it on fire.
79% of its energy from fossil fuels.
Yes. Right.
The administration is, in a sense, trying to conduct a high-stakes transplant on the heart of the economy while the patient remains alive and on the table. Don't get me wrong. Some kind of climate boom is now all but assured. The investment bank Credit Suisse predicted last year that the IRA would put more than $800 billion into the economy by the end of the decade, galvanizing $1.7 trillion in climate-friendly public and private spending overall. The law will transform the U.S. into the world's leading energy provider. The American renewable industry alone could attract 78% more investment per year.
All right.
But I worry that the federal government has started its experiments too haphazardly. The IRA didn't emerge from careful study, but from intra-party haggling. And even the CHIPS Act was more a crisis measure than a strategic intervention. So these shortcomings are forgivable. In the IRA's case, it's not like Republicans are ever going to help pass a climate bill.
No.
But these constraints have deprived the government of the strong institutions, internal expertise, and administrative capacity that made similar experiments successful in other countries. So for practical purposes, that means the government won't be able to spend all the money in the right place.
No.
So you're going to hear a lot about, Solyndra. What does that mean?
Boy.
I don't know, but it's something that they're yelling us at.
Yes.
It must be something.
There'll be a new hydrogen producer that goes under or something, and yeah, I guess so. A new hydrogen Solyndra we're waiting for.
Right. Second, the government may lack the ability to coordinate its own actions. Late last year, the Biden administration declined to help reopen a green aluminum factory in Ferndale, Washington. That was exactly the kind of low-carbon industry it wants to champion. The local union electric vehicle makers and the state's Democratic leadership wanted to revive the factory, but Biden chose not to intercede with the local electricity provider to supply the plant with enough cheap power to operate, even though it's a federal agency ostensibly under the president's control. Never mind the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. The right hand couldn't get the left hand to plug the cord in.
Weird. Okay. I mean,
so it's just an example of how
entirely.
things aren't totally all on one page yet.
I guess not.
Siloed agencies not talking to each other, in other words.
Okay.
And then finally, the government may not understand enough about the companies it's trying to help. In Taiwan and South Korea, industrial policy agencies don't only hand out money, they gather information from the private sector and use it to adjust goals. We're not there yet, basically.
We don't gather information.
We don't have
I feel
an
like we
agency
gather
that does
lots.
that. So it's great. We're moving in the right direction. It's a lot of good stuff that's happening. But it's not automatic that it's going to work perfectly. Just so you should be aware of both tracks.
Right.
On the one hand, they're doing the right thing, and it's an enormously important and different venture. And on the other hand, it's not guaranteed to succeed.
All right, I can understand
Needs
that.
watching and needs some investment in personnel and expertise and leadership to make it happen. Of course, won't happen under Republicans. That's something that ought to be highlighted. So there's a lot of different things that Democrats can run on, and one of them is this, except
hydrogen.
It's a great idea, but it's not there yet, and you need to be aware of that. You need to be aware that Republicans will attack it because they attack anything good, and you need to have a defense for that. And, in the end, it's all going to create jobs for the middle class, which means that Biden ought to be able to use it, and Democrats ought to be able to use it as a economic tool for elections, but not quite there yet. And because we're not quite there yet, and because none of this is guaranteed, it's yet another reason why it's great to try to pick off a couple of percentage points of non-college folks who tend to vote Republican these days because of culture wars. But this illustrates why it's so important, how it can be done, and why it's not easy. That's why I thought it was worth going into all of this.
It is. And plus, we get to think about hydrogen and the things.
And Hindenburg's blowing up
in
in the glass onion.
Right. And middle-class jobs connected to hydrogen, like selling hydrogen and hydrogen
I don't want to
accessories.
spoil the movie for people who haven't seen you, but a lot of things blow up. So if you like that sort of thing, it's a great movie for you.
Yeah.
Also makes fun of Elon Musk, so it's like a twofer.
All right, then. Everyone can go get along with that. So, okay. Yeah, right. No, that hasn't spoiled it for me so far, but I still haven't seen it. So,
Well, you have to go see it.
yeah, I guess so.
Because not only does it make fun of
You have to
Elon
go.
Musk, but a lot of things blow up.
All right. That's reasonable to expect out of a good movie these days.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Very cool. We'll have an eye out for figuring out. I'm still not entirely clear what the hydrogen is going to do for me, but I guess it's because it's experimental at this point. I know they've been talking about it for some number of years that there would be hydrogen-powered cars, but I haven't even had a chance to get an electric one yet. And I would like to have one of those before I have to get a hydrogen one, I think. Maybe I could just move directly to it.
Right.
I don't know. It all seems pretty out of reach. But, yeah, I am aware that, for instance, a lot of people will be adding solar panels to their homes because there's an enormous subsidy, a not so enormous subsidy, but one that might be helpful for buying electric cars, although most of the electric cars are upscale in the market and don't qualify for these things.
For your readers,
but,
for later, and for you,
something.
I'm just sending you this
Yeah.
little piece. We may not
Thank
spend
you.
a tremendous amount of time since my segment is pretty much done. But it's all about hydrogen.
All right.
And
I like
make
the
the
low
case
number
for
of
clean
electrons.
hydrogen. Clean hydrogen has three main roles to fill in a decarbonized U.S. energy system. One, energy storage and balancing. Two, as feedstock. And three, as fuel. Other technologies can fulfill these roles, but the versatility and scalability of clean hydrogen makes it a game changer when it comes to systemic decarbonization.
Okay.
Wind and solar dominated
they say
electric
this.
systems will prevail as a mechanism for economy-wide decarbonization.
Yeah.
But hydrogen is one of the few technologies that can help balance the electricity system year-round for, like, when the wind isn't blowing or when it's not sunny out or that sort of thing.
Are we really still doing
Hydrogen
that?
is feedstock alongside energy storage and balancing. Hydrogen can be used as feedstock and fuel in other hard-to-abate sectors. Hydrogen is a key feedstock needed to produce electrofuels. In previous work, we've shown electrofuels are a subset of the clean transportation fuels necessary to achieve net zero emissions. So it's used in helping electricity-derived non-carbon fuels.
Okay.
And hydrogen is fuel by itself. Use hydrogen and nitrogen oxide pollutants, so you have to be careful about that. But
all right. Please.
they can be mitigated with policy support. And it's a product of the future for a variety of reasons.
Okay.
It has benefits in the long run,
people
including
sell
green
the product.
hydrogen jobs.
I hope so. Okay. Well, I'll start reading about it, I guess. I have a feeling that if I do enough reading, we'll get to a point where we realize, oh, okay, well, it does sound great, but that's according to people in the hydrogen industry. I don't know. Anyway, we'll find out what kind of, I guess if they still have to deal with pollutants, there's some issues there.
Well, there's
all
no
right.
panacea, but, the point is, why is it even being discussed? This is why it's even being discussed.
Yeah, well, we have to know about it now. So, okay. Well, thanks. We got some resources I can hand off to Scott, and Scott can pass them to the rest of you, and we'll all become educated on hydrogen. I guess we have to if we're behind the curve on
Clean hydrogen and green hydrogen.
Yeah.
Can't just be ordinary
That
hydrogen.
worries me. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I got a lot to read now about hydrogen and figure it out. I'm worried there's like some residual, triggering, I guess. It's not really the right word for it, but some residual, I don't know what, recoiling fear that I have from hearing about what I imagine are industry advocates saying hydrogen's great, and not only that, wait till you find out about the new clean hydrogen and green hydrogen. Like, I'm old enough, we all are really, it's not that long ago, to remember, what about clean coal? We'll use, instead of using the bad coal that everybody's upset about, we'll use the clean coal. What's clean coal? It's clean. It's coal that's a little bit less dirty burning than some of the other coal. Okay. So it's clean coal. No, it's still dirty coal. It's just less dirty. And while that's better than dirtier, I guess, who are we trying to fool here by calling it clean coal? And the answer is you. Oh, well, me, in that case, then I get worried when you say, well, hydrogen seems clean. I mean, not a whole lot of electrons. Is that clean? I don't know. But now I'll read about it. Greg has provided us some great stuff and we can catch up on it. And I would bet you anything, small, that someone in our audience already knows the hydrogen game inside out and is texting, faxing, or hashtagging with the KITM hashtag on Mastodon and not Twitter. I assume, all the information that we'll need, even though it might become informational overload. But we can share it and digest it as is necessary along the way. Now, back to other items that I've had in pocket and wanted to share with you. I guess we'll start off with the one I mentioned earlier from the Bulwark about the Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump culture war infighting. Tim Miller wrote this for the Bulwark, although it's interesting. It says Bulwark Plus. I don't know what that's supposed to be. And I don't know whether that will become obvious at some point in this article or not. But the article title here is the DeSantis Soft Boys, BOIS, online, right? The DeSantis Soft Boys can dish it but can't take it. Subheader reads, groomer slander for thee, but not for me. You can see that the theme of the article becomes immediately clear what's going on. But it's kind of interesting in hearing the names bandied about and the nuances being expressed just to see where battle lines are being drawn. You are not going to believe what happened, dear reader, begins Tim Miller. In a shocking breach of decorum, the former president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, issued a social media post slandering a political rival in deeply personal terms. And get this, he might even have exaggerated the details of the offense. In other words, Trump behaved in the exact same manner as he always has since thrusting himself onto the tabloid scene as America's most lovable real estate nepotism baby. But for some MAGA observers, there is one thing startlingly new-ish about the former president's latest broadside. It's his target, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the prized stalking horse of the conservative infotainment industrial complex. It's an interesting turn of phrase for him there. Whoops, I've triggered some pop-ups and wrecked everything. All right, so as we said, his target, Ron DeSantis, and this is artfully put, the prized stalking horse of the conservative infotainment industrial complex. Oh, my stars and garters. Okay, if you missed it, Trump's latest attack featured a picture in which DeSantis is shown drinking, glug, 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 alcohol drinking, with women who appear younger than him and are allegedly his students. You may remember we read a story about this at some point, I don't know, a couple of months ago, I would guess, about how Ron DeSantis, I think the only private sector job that he maybe ever held, perhaps that's the case, or at least early on. Anyway, after graduation, that he parlayed that into teaching at an exclusive private school. Was it one that he had attended during his high school years? I can't recall whether that was part of the story or not. But anyway, so an elite, Florida, Georgia, Southern, boarding school, preppy central kind of a place. And he was just barely graduated. So he was like the cool young teacher. And apparently some of his escapades there included building trust with the kids, I guess, by going to their drinking parties, which they ought not to have been having because they were, of course, underage. But as you know, elite white kids at elite boarding school, prep school facilities will do a fair bit of underage drinking because something, and that's the tradition, and it's a racial stereotype as well, I guess. And at any rate, among Republicans, when he wasn't a rival yet to Trump, that was easily excused because, gosh, either we all did that, or even if we didn't, or we frown on it now, he's a Republican, and so who cares? Therefore, we forget about it. But in the Trump campaign, they socked it away for opposition research and for attack ads later on, if and when DeSantis actually runs against him for the Republican nomination for president. So if you missed it, Trump's latest attack featured a picture in which DeSantis is doing that stuff. One included the caption, "Here is Ron DeSanctimonious," that's his nickname, which is not shorter than his real name for him. "Here is Ron DeSanctimonious grooming high school girls with alcohol as a teacher." And I mean, that's what it was. So, he may never have, I don't know whether he ever made any advances on any of them, that includes the full spectrum of things that can go wrong in that situation. I don't know. I don't think anybody has charged that. They were just sort of talking about it's a weird and awkward situation that you should never put yourself in, and that is true. But characteristically, Donald Trump runs away with it and says he's grooming high school girls with alcohol as a teacher, even though that's not a bad conclusion to draw. In another post, or in the other post, the user Trump is re-geeting, and I guess is that on Getter or something, or is that so on Getter you instead of retweeting, you're re-geeting, even though it should be like re-getting, but I don't know. Anyway, in the other post, the user Trump is, re-geeting, that's the term they use, says, "Having drinks with underage girls and cuddling with them certainly look pretty gross and, oh boy, ephebophilia-esque." So I guess using is that the right term? I mean, all I remember is that when you're dealing with teenagers, there's another term for it other than pedophilia, and I forget what that term is, and I guess this is it here. And, so he's actuallying right in the middle of his own post here, this guy. Anyway, you have seen this movie before. Remember when Trump threatened to reveal Ted Cruz's supposed affairs? When he accused Ben Carson of being a child molester? I don't remember that one, actually. When he falsely claimed that Jeb liked, quote, Mexican illegals because his wife is one. I sort of remember that one. When he alleged that Mika Brzezinski was bleeding from her face after plastic surgery. When he retweeted someone who used a hashtag pedo Biden, etc., 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 all of which are all linked, including all three separate et ceteras. So yeah, it's very much a Trump habit. And yet, an array of people who gleefully supported Trump for president twice, despite this decades-long pattern of behavior, are now very concerned, capitalized, right, about his nastiness. Byron York, the Washington Examiner's saddest Trump lickspittle, lamented that Trump is going, quote, lower and lower. Former editor for Trump fan blog American Greatness, Pedro Gonzalez, is now under the impression, I don't know who that is, that his one-time hero is, quote, unserious and acting based on his insecurities. You don't say, he adds parenthetically. Claire Monster, is that right? Clara Monster, and miniature tough boy, Claremont, I guess Claremont Institute, Claire Monster, and miniature tough boy Dave Reaboi, R-E-A-B-O-I, unfortunately has B-O-I right in his name, called it bottom feeder stuff. To be fair, if we're going to do that, I guess, Reaboi, whatever his name may or may not be paid to tweet for Hungary and anti-Qatari interests, and Ron DeSantis, among all the, so that's interesting. So Reaboi, he's saying might actually be a paid DeSantis operative. I guess that's rumored to be the case. I don't know, but there's a link you can read for yourself about that. But to be fair, Reaboi may actually be doing that. So this may be work product and not his genuine opinion that these attacks are bottom feeder stuff. But in general, this sentiment seems to be shared everywhere on the right, from National Review to Daily Wire. Yet the most trenchant rebuke of Trump's antics came from DeSantis himself, who lashed out at a press conference saying, "I don't spend my time trying to smear other Republicans." Yes, other Republicans. And as he says here, therein lies the rub. And I guess that's the explanation for having seen someone on Mastodon today saying, everyone, stop saying therein lies the rub. The line from Shakespeare is, there's the rub. And there's no therein, but I don't know. I guess that's a pet peeve for Shakespeare people. And because I saw it, I'll point that out. I'm not a Shakespearean enough to have been able to remember that. But okay, DeSantis and his stands aren't upset that the former president issued an exaggerated personal attack unbecoming of his status. Had Trump dredged up an old drinking photo of Eric Swalwell or Chuck Schumer, or a pic of Mitt Romney with a milk mustache cavorting with younger women, and made unfounded claims targeting them with QAnon dog whistles about ephebophilia, well, that would be one thing. He might even get some retweets about how such bon mots are, to be sure, indecorous, but can be understood as merely being the middle finger the elites deserve. You see, Conservatism Incorporated is only upset because Trump smeared their precious, the guy they all hope and pray will lead them into a glorious post-Trump future filled with corporate tax cuts, lib-owning, and election victories. This type of hypocrisy about Mr. Trump's behavior is well worn. Dog bites man. But what's particularly galling is the fact that one of the only GOP politicians who has been as wanton in making baseless accusations of pedophilia is Ron DeSantis himself. And DeSantis' accusations haven't even been limited to political opponents. He goes after innocent, regular folks, just minding their own business, too, not to mention public servants. Recall that DeSantis' office not only accused not just every gay teacher in his state of being a groomer, but went so far as to claim that anyone who opposed his efforts to ban teachers from acknowledging that gay families exist was themselves a pedophile sympathizer. Remember the quote from his spokesperson, Christina Pushaw, who we profiled a couple of times, or read profiles of, rather, on the show a few times. Her quote, "If you are against the anti-grooming bill, you are probably a groomer. Or at least you don't denounce the grooming of 4 to 8-year-old children," Christina Pushaw had tweeted. That was not a DeSantis ally or a Twitter rando. It's the woman he pays to speak on his behalf, and who was apparently given the okay to double down in interviews about that bill. There's more. DeSantis promoted a false claim that a political rival, quote, protected a sexual predator for years, unquote. This is something I didn't know about. He offered the governor's mansion as a safe space for Chaya Raichik, the founder of Libs of TikTok, a social media feed whose entire raison d'etre, if you will, he's using the French, so we did our best on that one, is making accusations of pedophilia against random LGBTQ plus individuals. That's all she does. That's her purpose. It is. It's her raison d'etre. It's her purpose in life here. None of these smears or tactics, by the way, were met with outrage from the conservative media. None of those were too low. None of those were self-destructive. Byron York didn't lament that DeSantis' office was going lower and lower. The NatCons, or as Greg likes to call them, the NatCs, right? National Conservative, okay. They didn't tug on their furry chins about this being bottom feeder stuff. The opposite, in fact. These moves proved that DeSantis was a fighter. These faux tough guys decided that literally anyone in America can be smeared as a groomer. Teachers, drag performers, children's hospital employees, anyone. And that's fair game. But the moment Trump suggests DeSantis might have done something untoward, they flop on the ground like French soccer players begging for a red card. It's more ethnic stereotypes. It's hypocritical. You know the word, hypocritical. It's cruel. It's pathetic. But more importantly, and he uses the genuine article here, the F word, it's effing weak. If anyone should be forced to weather some groomer accusations, it's the guy whose office mainstreamed the shtick. So either clean up the act or buck up, Ron boys. what goes around comes around. And yeah, I guess that's basically true. And I read it in the Bulwark anyway. So that's something that I wanted to put on the record there. All right, let's see. Other things that need to be on the record, for various reasons. They're floating around. I mentioned on Friday, I think, that we read the story that what's his name, Robert O'Brien, is that right? The former one of the national security advisors that didn't end up in huge trouble or get revealed as a QAnon wackadoodle for the Trump administration had been subpoenaed, and that was at the time the big news about some of the, maybe the biggest name to have been subpoenaed in the continuing Jack Smith investigations. But there's a bigger name now, and I guess it was already true on Friday when I discussed O'Brien. Do I have the name right? And I just didn't know it yet. But here's something just real quick we'll read from The Hill, which will bring us up to date on it. The bigger name, there are very few. Trump lawyers now getting set to appeal this. I guess they made an initial objection and lost. Oh, and I'm pretty sure I have an earlier report about it. The initial mention of it must be somewhere here close, but yeah, maybe not. Maybe all I have is the pocketed story about the appeal of it, but okay, that'll give it all away when I read you the headline at last. Trump lawyers to appeal DOJ subpoena of Mike Pence, claiming executive privilege, of course. That, according to various reports and the reporting for The Hill by Jared Gans. This, again, would this have been Saturday reporting? Yes, I think so. But the facts were already out on Friday. I just didn't know yet. No one had written them up. Attorneys for former President Trump plan to appeal the subpoena that Justice Department Special Counsel Jack Smith issued to former Vice President Mike Pence as part of his investigation into the former president's role in the January 6th riot at the Capitol, according to multiple reports. So remember, Jack Smith has both the January 6th portfolio now and the Pervolago documents case. The Pence subpoena, the O'Brien subpoena was in relation to both. The Pence subpoena apparently connected only to the January 6th investigation, which, makes sense. CBS first reported Friday that a source close to Trump's legal team said his lawyers would contest the subpoena for Pence. So not actually an appeal at this point. It's just simply a motion to quash, I guess. But would contest this subpoena for Pence to turn over documents and provide testimony about his interactions with Trump in the lead up to the 2020 presidential election and the insurrection. The challenge would be based on an argument of executive privilege. A source familiar with the discussions, this is interesting. Okay, I was like, where is this going? A source familiar with the discussions, members of Trump's legal team are having, also told NBC News of the plans. Trump has on multiple occasions argued that executive privilege should shield him or former administration officials from having to provide documents or testimony for investigations involving him or an aspect of his administration. He asserted executive privilege to try to prevent former administration officials from testifying before the House Select Committee that investigated the insurrection, and to try to stop the National Archives from providing records about the attack to the committee. His arguments of executive privilege have been dismissed in many cases in the past following court battles. Of course, the court battles are in some cases the very point. The Hill has reached out to Trump's 2024 presidential campaign for comment. The former Indiana governor, that's Pence, has not publicly said since the subpoena was issued whether he plans to cooperate with it. But Pence did not appear before the House committee during its investigation during the past congressional session. I don't know that they subpoenaed him. They may have invited him. Trump and Pence notably had a falling out after Pence refused to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Also after Trump told his people that maybe they should hang him. Anyway, the former president has harshly criticized Pence since the end of his administration over the incident. Still, Trump complimented Pence as an honorable man on Friday in an interview with Fox News Digital after the news of the subpoena was publicized. Smith's investigation is also looking into the classified and sensitive documents that were found at Trump's Pervalago property in Florida in August. They helpfully remind us at the end of the article. So we don't know how it'll go. We don't know how strong. We don't even know the basis of the claims of executive privilege really at this point. His record has not been good on that, and it's unlikely that what Smith is probably seeking from Pence is really a protected piece of information or is the type of thing that would normally fall under executive privilege, particularly, of course, if it was in relation to the planning of a crime that they were getting ready to perpetrate on from the Trump side, anyway, of the Trump White House. But we'll see. That's where we stand. So, there's some drama in the making to keep an eye on. All right, let's see. Where are we here? We're getting close to the third break, so we'll try and shoehorn in a few narrower items, including this one, which I thought was of some real interest, but I haven't seen getting a lot of national attention. Jacob Wall, you remember him? Jack Berkman, his partner, and Jacob Wall, once again, pulling stupid stunts that ought to land them in jail, and this time getting convicted of something for having pulled these stupid stunts, but still not landing in jail. And you would be well justified in asking, why the hell aren't these guys in jail after all? So here's the stunt that got them in trouble. Emails expose right-wing fraudsters' scheme to use robocalls to suppress black voter turnout in Cleveland. All right, so this was published at the end of last week, February 9th. And I'm reading from, on the web, cleveland.com, which I guess is the, Cleveland, maybe, is it the Plain Dealer plus other local papers? I don't know. But, at any rate, hours after right-wing fraud peddlers, and it's the right term for them, although, they should just be, criminals, honestly, which is what they are now. Or formally at this point, but they really always have been, more so than fraud peddlers. Anyway, hours after right-wing fraud peddlers Jack Berkman and Jacob Wall, and please explain the relationship between those two. There's some good 30 years between them, I think, and it's weird how they operate together in this way. Unleashed tens of thousands of robocalls, this is what they did, on black voters in Cleveland and other cities across the country to suppress their vote in the November 2020 election. Hours after, I guess, they unleashed those calls, Berkman dashed off a giddy email to his partner provocateur. I love these robocalls, Berkman, then 54, wrote to the then 23-year-old Wall in the email that contained no punctuation or capital letters. Getting angry black callbacks. So people were angry about the robocalls and making complaints, and he thought that was terrific because they were wasting their time and energy on something, useless to fight them against, I guess. But clearly the writers think that there's something odd about him being 54 and the other one 23, and them just continually working on nothing but fraud for years on end. Anyway, win or lose, the black robo, as they called it, was another great JW idea. Jacob Wall, I guess, JW. Berkman said of the scheme that would eventually end with both men being convicted felons and facing their largest Federal Communications Commission robocall fine in the agency's history. But, of course, who cares, because those very often either don't get paid or get paid with somebody's PAC money somewhere along the line and not theirs. The emails bolstered Cuyahoga County prosecutors' assertion that the men specifically sought to suppress black voter turnout in the 2020 election between Democrat Joe Biden and then President Donald Trump. The email is among several pieces of evidence that prosecutors here used to charge and eventually elicit guilty pleas from Berkman and Wall for calls that went to Cleveland and East Cleveland residents. The men also face similar criminal charges in Michigan, which are pending. The men admitted to telecommunications fraud, a fifth-degree felony, and agreed to pay a $2,500 fine. Woo! And were sentenced in November to 2 years probation. Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court Judge John Suchula also ordered the men to spend 500 hours with a nonprofit organization registering voters in low-income neighborhoods in Washington, D.C., which I guess ought to be difficult because they're on probation in Ohio. So I don't know. I guess they got to tell their probation officer when they're traveling to D.C. And of course, probation in Ohio ought to be difficult because they are D.C. area based, these two. So I don't know. But I just, pointing out that why is there no prison sentence on this? Why a fifth-degree felony of telecommunications fraud? Every time you see Republicans screaming about voter fraud, or even voter suppression, or whatever, they are, on social media, the randos are calling for executing people who are suspected of this stuff when they're Democrats. Or, of course, locking them up and throwing away the key if they're particularly compassionate people. But really, 2 years probation, $2,500 fine.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It's the Kagro in the Morning Show, in case you were wondering. There aren't any others, as far as I'm aware. Let me tell you about the rest of the Jacob Wohl, Jack Berkman scheme for voter suppression in Ohio and elsewhere, just so you have some idea of exactly what they did. And remember that there was mention of an FCC fine. The FCC in August of 2021 proposed a $5.1 million fine against the men and their lobbying firm, Berkman and Associates, and his associate is a 23-year-old guy, for calling cell phones without the owner's consent. Like, these are the lowest ranking, the lowest level crimes they could find, or I guess make stick for these things. But they really ought, I don't know, they ought to be legislating a way to get after these guys more aggressively. As I mentioned to you, and we may have run out of time as we were exiting to the break, they are charged with and have pled guilty to a telecommunications fraud, which is a fifth-degree felony, paying a $2,500 fine and 2 years probation. And they also will get 500 hours of community service registering voters in low-income neighborhoods in Washington, D.C. That's the totality of this for what they did. Berkman and Wohl did not respond to emails seeking any comment. At their sentencing hearing, Wohl said that he wanted, quote, to express my absolute regret and shame over all this, which is just words that he's saying in order to get a light sentence, and he did succeed in getting a light sentence. He's not ashamed of all this. That's what the emails actually bear out here. Berkman said he echoed Wohl's statements and is likewise insincere in this. The robocall went out on August 26th, 2020. It falsely claimed that people who voted by mail risked giving their personal information to the government, which would use it to check for outstanding debts and arrest warrants, or to implement a forced vaccination program. The message was read by a person who said her name was Tamika Taylor, which authorities believe was meant to confuse recipients into thinking that it was the mother of Breonna Taylor, Tamika Palmer. Louisville, Kentucky police, of course, shot Breonna Taylor during a botched raid in March of 2020, and her killing sparked protests across the country. So they figured they'd ride on that story in order to make their voter suppression robocall that much more effective. The reader also said that she was from, get this, Project 1599, not 1619, but Project 1599, the civil rights organization founded by Jack Berkman and Jacob Wall. And of course, Jack Berkman and Jacob Wall would found nothing even close to a civil rights organization if they founded anything at all, but it makes it sound like it's, they don't know who, most people don't have any idea who Jack Berkman and Jacob Wall are, but okay, project, and then some numbers, maybe it's 1619, maybe it's not. They say it's a civil rights thing, so I better listen to it. Investigators also determined that the men were behind another call that went out on September 14th, 2020, supporting Kanye West's unsuccessful presidential bid. They were not charged in relation to that call, and I suppose if all they're doing is supporting him for president, that, there's nothing you can charge him with for that. Authorities in several states quickly began investigating. Out of more than 67,000 calls placed, more than 8,100 went to people in Cleveland and East Cleveland, according to court records. About 3,400 people answered the call. Investigators with the Office of the Ohio Attorney General discovered through subpoenas that the men used Message Communications to send out the robocall. That's the name of the company, I guess, according to a 2-page investigative report. The report also said that Berkman chose not to scrub the lists of people whose numbers were on the National Do Not Call Registry. So they actually made the decision, screw the Do Not Call Registry, we're going to call those people anyway. Berkman first emailed a Message employee. That's the name of the company they were using. Remember, Message Communications. It's a little confusing. He first emailed a Message employee on August 22nd, 2020, asking if the men's check had arrived. Wall emailed Berkman just after noon on August 25th and attached an audio file of the robocall. We should send it to black neighborhoods in Milwaukee, Detroit, Philadelphia, Charlotte, Richmond, Atlanta, and Cleveland, Wall wrote, because he's so ashamed. 5 hours later, Berkman narrowed the field to Cleveland, Philadelphia, Minneapolis, Chicago, and New York City. Less than an hour after that, Berkman emailed Wall that the data and many zip codes were loaded and that they had 2 waves of 267,000 calls ready to go. All Wall needed to do, Berkman wrote, was upload the audio file, and then Berkman would pick days and go in and hit go. Wall wrote back to Berkman at 10:40 a.m. the next morning that he completed the task and updated the calls per minute number to the maximum. Berkman replied 10 minutes later, "Great job." The calls immediately sparked backlash, much to the delight of Berkman, prompting him to send the email praising Wall for the, quote, black robo. The emails also show that the men wanted the calls to receive press coverage and agreed to lie to reporters about their involvement. But, 5th degree felony, 2 years probation, why not? Robo getting quite a bit of play on Twitter, Wall wrote around 3:30 p.m. the day the calls went out. I think they will have to write, meaning, I guess, the reporters. In a later email, Wall told Berkman to deny being involved to Will, an apparent reference to the Daily Beast's Will Sommer, who frequently covers the men's exploits. That will make them right, Wall wrote. In a story published that day, Sommer reported that Wall wrote in an Instagram message that he was, quote, unaware of any robocall. Berkman hung up when Sommer began asking about the call and did not answer when he called again, the story said. And I mean, what kind of a thin excuse is it to say, we don't know anything about it, we're not involved in it, when the message, the disclaimer at the end of the message says it was paid for by Project 1599, the civil rights organization founded by Jack Berkman and Jacob Wall. Oh, false flag. Right, sure. The next day, an Associated Press reporter sought comment and emailed Berkman a copy of a story reporting that Michigan's Attorney General, Dana Nessel, had launched a criminal investigation into the men over the robocall. Usually we ignore defamation, Berkman wrote in response. Not this time. Well, you'll also be convicted in it. Usually you don't get convicted, but not this time. This time you did. In a separate email, Berkman told the reporter that the robocall was, quote, likely a leftist group trying to humiliate us, and that it was timed to spoil the launch of a documentary that included the men that was set to air on CNN later that week. Which, honestly, if the documentary wasn't these people deserve to be imprisoned for the rest of their lives or strung up by their ankles, what would be the point of airing a documentary about these two idiots? But, leave it to CNN. All right. Well, at any rate, so here they are denying any responsibility, denying any connection with it, trying to say it's a false flag operation. And then when they're in court, oh, I'm deeply sorry. I regret this, that, and the other thing. No, they don't. Berkman also told the AP reporter that the two were filing a $300 million defamation action against Nesser the following week. Do you think they did that? She knows full well that neither I nor Jacob were involved, he wrote, or at least that's what we think he wrote because he wrote it so poorly that a lot of the words are misspelled. So that's what we think that means. And an email to I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I was just saying, he's filled with regret, etc. when he's there in court. I guess you could argue, and they must have done that. Well, of course he regrets the whole thing. As a matter of fact, even while it was happening, he was trying to distance himself from it. He knew right away that it was a mistake. Well, if he knew it was a mistake as soon as he did it, well, for one thing, you don't write emails to one another congratulating each other on your mistakes. And second of all, I think we all know exactly what's really going on here. It was fully intentional, and you don't regret doing it. And how could you when you get away with it, basically? I mean, what, a $2,500 fine? Maybe the $5 million fine to the FEC will be paid perhaps out of their corporate accounts or, PAC fundraising or whatever, but they won't be out of pocket very much. And the probation isn't much of a signal that they shouldn't be doing this. It's an invitation to do it again. Anyway, in an email to another reporter, Berkman falsely speculated that the calls could have been connected to billionaire philanthropist George Soros. Yes, of course, it was George Soros doing that. Berkman also wrote that he and Wohl had, quote, politely declined requests from Trump's presidential campaign to produce robocalls in the past. We don't do that stuff, Berkman wrote. So lie upon lie upon lie, and still, a little probation and a light fine. So I guess we'll be looking for more of the same from Jacob Wohl and Jack Berkman in the future. We just the legal system can't seem to figure out how to deal with these guys. So, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe the disappearing system should be the one figuring out what to do with these guys. But we don't do that because American exceptionalism in this country. Okay. Let's see. Other things that I would like to bring you up to date on, and there are many. Shall we go with, let's do this. We'll head in this direction. Back to Russia, just to sort of let you know what else is piling up out there in terms of the weirdness that they are up to and what we're learning about their activity the more we look at it. One, I'll read you this quick one, I think, maybe from the Daily Beast. Top Russian official teases, quote, the next Ukraine. I'm going to have to go back to the pocket version of one. Teases the next Ukraine in new threat. Let's see if I have I can't even, maybe I can reload this thing and make sure I get the article authorized. Shannon Vavra, the national security reporter for the Daily Beast, and she's got this to say. Russia's top diplomat said the actions of Western nations could soon turn Moldova into, and they use this phrase, and I guess they must know what they're saying when they say it, into the next Ukraine, according to TASS, the Russian news agency, state news agency, right? Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, remember him? Accused Moldovan President Maya Sandu. I guess I'm hoping I'm getting the name even close to pronunciation. I'm not familiar with Moldovan names in the way we ought to be, I guess. But Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov accused Moldovan President Maya Sandu of being eager to join NATO, which, is true. That's not much of an accusation. Sandu, Lavrov said, is, quote, ready to unite with Romania, and in fact, to do almost anything. Really? Okay. Well, Romania, which is a member of the NATO organization, which was created, of course, to provide collective security against Russia. Okay. We know that, but it's always actually probably a good reminder that Romania is in NATO, I guess. That's not always obvious to everyone. And of course, they used to be communist bloc back in the day, so it's a little odd. Lavrov's comments appeared to echo complaints Russian President Vladimir Putin made about Ukraine and NATO when announcing Russia's invasion into Ukraine last year, or the second or third wave of the invasion of Ukraine that took place last year. Putin cited the expansion of the alliance and Ukraine's interest in joining NATO as, quote, fundamental threats against Russia in his speech justifying the invasion. Further expansion of the NATO infrastructure are unacceptable for us, Putin said at the time. Lavrov's comments came as Western officials warned that Russia may be gearing up for a new offensive nearly 1 year into the war in Ukraine. It's not the first time tensions have flared over whether Russia might be eyeing Moldova as an extension of the conflict in Ukraine. Moldova's intelligence and security services, the SIS, has previously warned that Russia may seek to connect Russian-controlled areas in Ukraine by conducting a new offensive and then creating a land corridor with the Russian-backed breakaway region of Transnistria in Moldova. Wow. Okay, so there's already a breakaway region of Moldova, as it turns out. Those of you who are Moldova watchers already know this, of course. The head of SIS, Alexandru Musteata, maybe, warned in December that a campaign to go after Moldova appeared inevitable. Yikes. The question is not whether the Russian Federation will launch a new offensive in the direction of Moldovan territory, but when it will happen. Either at the beginning of the year, in January, February, or later, in March or April. Well, that covers an awful lot of the year, but still, you got to be on alert, I guess. So let's see. This is real and very high risk, he said. Moldova declared independence from the Soviet Union in 1991. 1 year later, Russian-backed separatists started a conflict in Transnistria and now control the region, which borders Ukraine, believe it or not. Judging by the information we have, Russia can go further to create a corridor with the Transnistrian region, which is in the territory of Moldova, Musteata said. The agency later issued a statement reaffirming that an offensive was possible. A new offensive of the Russian Federation in this direction could take place in 2023, the agency said. Moldova is still not a member of NATO, which maintains a collective defense agreement. When Moldova gained European Union candidate status last year, Lavrov suggested that Moldova wanted to, quote, annul everything Russian, just like in Ukraine. Lavrov warned Thursday that Moscow thinks that Moldovan officials are prepared to resolve the Transnistria issue by force. Moldova's Ministry of Foreign Affairs lambasted Lavrov for his threats on Thursday. We reject the statements with regard to Moldova of the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, a ministry spokesperson, Daniel, Voda, said. No idea how you pronounce this. The A in Voda at the end has, I don't even know what that is, that punctuation mark over it. It's a little bottom half of a circle there, a little swoop over there. I don't know what you call that one or how to pronounce it, but okay. Moldovans, regardless of political or geopolitical preferences, want peace, freedom, and democracy. And I guess they think they're not going to get that from the Russians, maybe with good reason. There are some signs coming from Transnistria that could indicate trouble ahead for Russia, including, according to Ukrainian authorities. Approximately 1,000 young and middle-aged men in recent months have flocked to Transnistria, which has raised suspicions about whether they are waiting for orders. Ukraine's armed forces told VOA News, Voice of America, in December. Lavrov has previously warned Moldova about retaliation if Russia perceives that its troops in Transnistria are threatened. Any action that would threaten the security of our troops would be considered under international law as an attack on Russia, Lavrov said in September. So there are troops on the ground there, huh? Russia's efforts to subvert Moldovan rule and destabilize Moldova from within run deep, according to the U.S. Treasury Department, and of course we're seeing that everywhere. Last year, the Treasury Department sanctioned oligarchs and other entities linked to the Russian government for running influence operations in Moldova and acting as instruments of Russia's global influence campaign. Moldova has already fallen in the crosshairs of Russia's invasion into Ukraine. Debris from Russian missile strikes against Ukraine has fallen into Moldova at least 3 times, according to Moldovan authorities. The country is incredibly vulnerable to Russia's energy dominance as well. 70% of Moldova's electricity supplies has historically come from Russian-occupied Transnistria, with approximately 20% coming from Ukraine. When Russia struck Ukrainian energy infrastructure during the war, Moldova had its lights cut as well. Making matters worse, Gazprom has also decreased gas supplies to Moldova by 1/3 in October. According to the Moldovan government, Russia's effort to control its energy supplies are aimed at influencing Moldova out of the EU orbit and back into Russia's. They don't want us to keep going on the European Union path. They want to keep Moldova under their zone of interest, Moldovan Infrastructure Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Andrei Spinu said, and that too oddly punctuated for English speakers. This is what Andrei Spinu told Politico in November. So, an eye on Moldova, if you have got one to spare. And speaking of Moldova, from the Washington Post on the same subject, Stephen McGrath and Christian Jardin on Moldova's president outlining Russian plan to topple their government. This dateline from the capital, which is Chisinau, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, but probably not. Anyway, I'm sure we could refine the pronunciation over the coming days. Moldova's president outlined Monday what she described as a plot by Moscow to use external saboteurs to overthrow her country's government, put the nation at the disposal of Russia, and derail its aspirations to one day join the European Union. President Maya Sandu's briefing comes a week after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said his country had intercepted plans by Russia's secret services to destroy Moldova, claims that were later confirmed by Moldovan intelligence agencies. The plan for the next period involves actions with the involvement of diversionists with military training, camouflaged in civilian clothes, who will undertake violent actions, attack some state buildings, and even take hostages, Sandu told reporters at a briefing. The purpose of these actions is to overthrow the constitutional order, to change the legitimate power from Chisinau to an illegitimate one, Sandu said, which would put our country at the disposal of Russia in order to stop the European integration process. She defiantly vowed the Kremlin's attempts to bring violence to our country will not succeed. Oh dear. Well, I hope that's true. There was no immediate reaction from Russian officials to Sandu's claims. Since Russia invaded Ukraine nearly a year ago, or, let's say 9 years ago, Moldova, a former Soviet republic of about 2.6 million people, has sought to forge closer ties with its Western partners. Last June, it was granted European Union candidate status, the same day as Ukraine. Sandu said that between October and December, Moldovan police and its Intelligence and Security Service, or SIS, have intervened in several cases of organized criminal elements and stopped attempts at violence. Over the past year, non-NATO Moldova has faced a string of problems. These include a severe energy crisis after Moscow dramatically reduced gas supplies, skyrocketing inflation, and several incidents in recent months involving missiles that have traversed its skies and debris that has been found on its territory. Moldovan authorities confirmed that another missile from the war in Ukraine had entered its airspace on Friday. Sandu said that Russia wants to use Moldova in the war against Ukraine without providing more details, and that information obtained by intelligence services contained what she described as instructions on rules of entry to Moldova for citizens from Russia, Belarus, Serbia, and Montenegro. I assure you that the state institutions are working to prevent these challenges and keep the situation under control, Sandu said. She said that Moldova's parliament must adopt draft laws to equip its intelligence and security service and the prosecutor's office with the necessary tools to combat more effectively the risks to the country's security. The president added that the plan would rely on several internal forces, but especially on criminal groups, and went on to name 2 Moldovan oligarchs. They're new in our radar here. Ilan Shor and Vladimir, Plahotniuk. Plahotniuk. There we go. Plahotniuk. Maybe with a C on the end there. We'll give it a try. Anyway, both of whom are currently in exile, so maybe they could come by and tell us how to pronounce their names. Both men last year were sanctioned by the U.S. and the UK, so they'll have to call in via Skype. Last fall, a series of mass anti-government protests, what do you know, organized by Shor's populist, Russia-friendly Shor Party. Wow. A little bit of an ego there. Also rocked Moldova amid the energy crunch. The president's press briefing on Monday comes after the resignation on Friday of Moldova's Prime Minister, Natalia, Gavrilita. I think that's not so bad, right? Natalia Gavrilita. The same day, Sandu appointed her defense and security advisor, pro-Western economist Dorin Resian, to succeed Gavrilita. On Friday, after Moldovan authorities confirmed the missile incident, U.S. State Department Deputy Spokesman Vedant Patel told reporters in Washington that Russia has for years supported influence and destabilization campaigns in Moldova, which often involve weaponizing corruption to further its goals. Very interesting. And again, like I said, got to have an eye on Moldova now and learn a little bit about Moldova while we've got one eye on it. And I guess just the latest in a string of incidents highlighting just how meddlesome Russia really is, and with the same tools over and over again, sometimes more extreme than others. I guess within their sphere of influence, it includes military occupation as well. All right, let's see. Things that I have not gotten to, but that I would like to. Maybe tomorrow would be a good day, and maybe Joan McCarter, if she's comes by, might want to discuss a little bit, just since it's more congressionally related. But there's, as it turns out, another member of Congress who, perhaps like George Santos, has a little bit of an invented background and resume. I mean, they all do to some extent, I think. But Anna Paulina Luna of Florida, as it turns out, is perhaps a little bit, not quite as much so far as they've been able to prove anyway, a fabulist as Santos. But again, somebody who has invented and reinvented themselves to an extreme level in the past few years. So maybe we'll read a couple of pieces about that and get you up to speed on that, and we can save that for tomorrow. We need to sort of close things out here for the day, but I guess I'll also note for the record, because it was brought to my attention by Patrick Snyder, who has sent me a couple of things using the KITM hashtag very recently, one of which is a tweet from Thomas Zimmer saying, Graham Wood wants us to believe that he is all about free speech, which is why he often rails against left-wing cancel culture. So what does he offer on Florida's authoritarian takeover of education? A qualified defense, as he puts it, of Christopher Rufo, one of the key architects behind it, which is sort of interesting and I guess also dovetailed with something I saw people complaining about over the weekend. Matt Iglesias, likewise, for some reason, joining in this weird migration of people from off of the somewhat infamous Harper's Bazaar, wasn't it Harper's letter railing against cancel culture and speaking up in defense of so-called free speech, and doing so from the position of people who are journalists saying, this is our livelihood here, the protection of free speech, and so we are a little bit extremist about it, I guess, but with good reason. And it being a fundamental right guaranteed under the Constitution, we should be standing on firm ground. But instead they stand on shaky ground because they're a little bit selective in what they condemn as attacks on free speech. And Iglesias, too, sort of dipping a toe in this, apparently referring or saying that we ought to be, focusing on kitchen table issues, which you heard a little bit about from Greg earlier today, but that free speech issues with respect to book banning was something he referred to as identity politics for librarians, which seemed like a pretty brusque dismissal of a fairly serious issue. So, Patrick pointing out that Thomas Zimmer tells us that it's more than just Iglesias, and that there's some weird hypocrisy to be explored there as well. Perhaps we'll save that for later on in the week. Time now for us to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy right here on Netroots Radio. Coming up next, and maybe we can find out a little bit, I know we can because he's already told me, a little bit about what's happening on the show.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, here's the setup for you. Cryptic but fun. A Trump lawyer wanted to say the dog ate the classified material in the empty folder on Trump's nightstand, but Trump hates dogs, so that's probably not the case. All right, well, that plus the usual collection of news from around the country and around the world, things we didn't get to. Stay tuned for more. We'll see you tomorrow.